Hi, welcome back to the Colorblind Architect Podcast. I'm your host, David, and it is the year 2021 now. Yay! It's actually the 2nd of January, so it's a little bit after the new year, but I am thrilled to be here again. Had a wonderful Christmas break. It's been very peaceful, very relaxing, and although I'm excited to get back to work, even though I've been working the whole time, but, back to work as in, like, getting back into the normal routine of things, I can say that I am very grateful for 2020. It was a good year for me, and I know it sucked for a lot of people. I know it's not exactly a year that will go down as being in the memory as being the greatest year for anybody. Because let's face it, the whole pandemic thing sucked. And it still sucks. It's still going on, right? It's been over a year since COVID-19 was first identified, first reported from China, and here we are, over a year later, and it's still going on. It's still killing people like crazy, and yeah, it just sucks. There's no way to sugarcoat that. Pandemics suck, especially ones that kill a lot of people. And as much as I really despise the overbearing nature of governments around the world, in my opinion, I think overreacting to this virus, clamping down on people's personal liberties in a way that I think is inappropriate. At the same time, I have to say I'm grateful for my family as well. My friends, they're all well. I know very few instances of, I know very few people personally who have been directly impacted by any deaths or permanent harm caused by the virus. So, something to be grateful for, right? So, what is the topic of the video today? What I wanted to talk about is some of the things that concern me about the incoming Biden administration. We are getting really close to the Congressional Certification of the Electoral College. And while granted, if you've been watching these videos, you know that I chose to vote for Trump in this last election, largely because I really distrust Joe Biden. I think he is crooked. I think he's a criminal. And I also really disagree with his policy prescriptions for things. But at the same time, I don't really see the objections being brought up by the Republican members of the House and Senate as actually leading anywhere other than a couple hours of debate, and then Joe Biden's still going to be certified the winner. So at this point, let's, sure, if a miracle happens, great. If not, oh well, it is what it is. So here's the thing that concerns me as we're going into this new year with this new president. Number one, taxes. Taxes are always a concern because they affect how people live. So the taxes that are being proposed by Biden are essentially the repeal of the Trump tax cuts. Now, if you listen to the fact checkers, they're going to try to tell you, oh, well, Biden's not raising taxes. He's just repealing the Trump tax cuts. Yeah, because if you repeal the Trump tax cuts, then that's raising taxes, because in order to repeal the tax cut, you have to reinstitute taxes that were not being charged under the Trump tax cuts. So, in other words, it's a tax hike. So, not sure how you're actually fact checking. So that's my number one concern, because I think that's going to be harmful to the economy to raise taxes at this time. I think it's crazy that government thinks that it can just spend like crazy and then, not actually cover their expenses. So I understand it from that standpoint why you might want to raise taxes if you're trying to balance the budget. But the problem is we're spending too much. That's the real problem, not that we're raising taxes. I think lower taxes are always better. People should be able to have more of their own money, and it's just that simple. So that's number one. Number two is the foreign entanglements. One of the things that Trump really brought to the American public during his time was a good old-fashioned American notion that we should keep out of other people's business, and we should also not let them get into our business. In other words, we should avoid foreign entanglements. Now, I can't say that Trump was perfect in that. Of course not. It would be impossible to not have foreign entanglements, but Trump was the first president in 40 years to not start any new wars. I'd say that's a really good start. Yeah, just saying. I don't like war, and I really don't like our soldiers being sent over to fight in wars. So I'd say that that's a big concern, because Joe Biden is one of these war hawk Democrats. He loves him some new wars. He loves having the military-industrial complex get more and more money. And don't get me wrong, I'm fine with the research that the military industrial complex does, because I love having new technology. But on the flip side, do we really need to be fighting all these foreign wars without reason? We've got soldiers in places that we don't even know about. There's stuff going down, like special operations and secret coups that the government's behind, and it's like, should we really be manipulating foreign governments and foreign powers by sending our soldiers in to do the dirty work and assassinations and sort? Should we really be sending in drones? I don't know. I don't feel like that's the right thing to be doing. I feel like we should be peaceful, very peaceful. I think we should be minding our own business. I'm just saying, maybe mind our own business would be a good foreign policy. Just possibly. Now, I get it. There's a lot of people who say that if we retreat from the globalist policies, then that leaves it wide open for the Chinese. And my thought is, yeah, well, the Chinese have already been making inroads despite our presence. Let's face it. We've been doing a really sucky job of foreign policy for a really long time. As a country, we just suck at foreign policy. And why? Because we keep trying to meddle. We keep trying to meddle with other people. We got to stop trying to meddle with other people. Let's get out of their business and tell them to keep out of ours. I love the idea of good trade policy. Great. Sure. Let's make sure that we have as free and open exchange of goods and services across boundaries as possible. Let's try to make sure that immigration is reasonable and open as possible to all those who are good and honest people. Great, wonderful. I'm all for that. At the same time, do we need to prevent illegal immigration? Yeah. Do we need to make sure that our borders are secure? Yeah. there's a lot of things that go into this issue of foreign policy. But one of the things that really concerns me is that Joe Biden is one of these Council of Foreign Relations types. And, the Council of Foreign Relations, we really need to root them out of Washington. They are an evil organization, I believe. And I know that probably sounds crazy, but the Council on Foreign Relations, if you know the history behind it, you understand anything coming out of the era with Woodrow Wilson is kind of evil, kind of sketchy. Woodrow Wilson was he was an evil dude. I'm sorry, but I really don't like Woodrow Wilson. First off, he was a KKK member. He was a white supremacist. But secondly, he believed in all kinds of really crazy ideas that are just not good for us. And why an organization founded by him and others who were of like minds, the progressives of the early 20th century, why we allow them to have so much sway over our government's policies just boggles my mind. So that's another thing that worries me. Another thing that worries me about the Biden administration is critical race theory. He's already said that he's going to reinstitute critical race theory into government training seminars. And my thought is, why? Why? Do you know what critical race theory is? Let me explain, Mr. Biden, if you're too stupid to know. But I don't think you're too stupid to know. I think you do know. But your fellow travelers in the Marxist wing, they're demanding it. And why are they asking for it? Well, so critical race theory is a variant. It's a subsidiary movement of the Marxist thought, the communist thought, about how everything needs to be criticized. That's literally what Marx says, right? He says everything needs to be criticized. Okay, well, yeah, sure. I'm fine with criticizing everything. I'm fine with studying everything. Okay, so to what end? Okay, so here's critical race theory. Critical race theory is the idea that there are some races that are subjugated and they are oppressed by the main race. And specifically, it's talking about white people being the oppressor class. The reason why it's a variant of Marxism is it's based on the Marxist ideology of the bourgeoisie oppressing the proletariat. Now, again, proletariat is a fake word. It was invented by Karl Marx. It's not a real thing. And the bourgeoisie, it's a boogeyman. The bourgeoisie is a boogeyman. I've mentioned this before. The bourgeoisie, if you actually look at what the actual root of the word, it actually literally means townsfolk. So why are the townsfolk the enemy of the Marxists? Well, it's the professional class. That's what they're talking about. Lawyers, architects, bankers, jewelers, basically anybody who has a skill or a profession, something that's unique. Anybody that's not a laborer. The proletariat are laborers, right? So the idea with critical race theory is that everybody of the minorities are all laborers, which is a ridiculous, stupid, racist notion. But if you know Karl Marx, you'll know that he is a racist himself. In fact, he was constantly calling his own son-in-law the N-word. Why? Because his own son-in-law was a Cuban of African descent. Specifically, he was black. Well, okay. So Karl Marx was racist against his own son-in-law. Yes, he was. In fact, he was a flaming racist. He hated anybody who wasn't white. Weird that, a Marxist theory, would wait, I'm confused. How does this work again? Oh, yes. See, here's the thing about Marxism. It's not supposed to make sense. If it was supposed to make sense, then it wouldn't be this convoluted, idiotic belief system that has caused the deaths of over 100 million people. So this is why I'm so radically opposed to critical race theory. It is a Marxist ideology, and anything Marxist is automatically evil in my book. Now, does that mean we shouldn't question the racism of our past? Yeah, we should. We should. Should we focus a lot of time and effort on racism? No. No, in fact, we should really try to aim to be colorblind. You know, like the colorblind architect. No, I'm saying this because our problem is we're focusing too much on race. We're thinking too much about it. Stop thinking so much about it. If you stop thinking so much about race, then maybe you'll stop seeing people as being different than you and realize that we're actually all the same. We're all underneath the melanin. We're all human. 99.99% identical. It's that 0.01% that makes us special. But we are all humans. We're all of the same race. There is no different race. We are all the human race. The fact that we have to say this, the fact that we have to keep talking about it, is really annoying. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so annoyed that Joe Biden won the election. You know, whether or not it was fraudulent, that's another discussion. But the fact of the matter is, in the Electoral College, he clearly won. So here we are. We're facing a president who is in violation of the, a president-elect who's in violation of the Emoluments Clause of the Constitution. He has been receiving kickbacks and bribes from foreign governments all over the world. He is in bed with communists, specifically the Communist Party of China, and also with the communists in our own country. He is pushing critical race theory. He is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. He is pro-war. He is pro-kill the soldiers by sending them off on pointless foreign wars. And he wants to raise our taxes. So, I mean, there's a lot to not be excited about with Joe Biden. So, where's the hope? Well, here's my hope. My hope is, what it always is. The fact that in the end, it's not about what's happening up in Washington. It's not about what's happening in the global sphere. It's what's happening in your home. Because the thing is that there's only so much we can control in our own lives, let alone in the world. The most important thing we can be doing is promoting virtue in our own home. So first, make sure we ourselves are doing our best to clean up our lives. So clean up our lives, clean up our rooms, just like Jordan Peterson says, right? And we need to also do what we can do to help our own families be as good and virtuous as possible within the limits of our humanity. That's the number one thing that we can be doing. Because ultimately, if we're not trying to live as virtuously as we can, then it's not going to matter. Because it's a collective thing. See, I'm very much into individual liberty. Okay, I very much believe in individual liberty, but for individual liberty to work, it requires enough of the population to be individually virtuous, collectively. So, in other words, if you get enough people who are virtuous in a community, then you don't need police, right? Because then crime doesn't happen, right? Because people police themselves. And the great thing is, if people police themselves, then you don't have a need for external police because they're doing it themselves, which makes us free because then there's no police power having to come down on us, right? If you follow me, so the idea is for individual liberty to actually work, we have to be virtuous. So that's my hope. My hope is that there's enough people who have woken up because of the year 2020 that hopefully there's going to be a great awakening. Hopefully there's a great awakening happening and people are actually turning themselves to God. And by God, I mean to virtue, to goodness, to righteousness. Not necessarily, you don't necessarily have to believe in, the Christian God or the Muslim God or the Jewish God or the Hindu God or anything like that. No, just so long as you believe in righteousness and virtue and goodness. So long as you believe in good principles. That's good enough, okay? Would it be great if you believe in God? Sure. I don't necessarily think that that's a prerequisite. I think you just have to believe in goodness and in righteousness. I think it helps, but it's not, I don't think it's required. I think what we need as a society is we all need to strive for goodness. And what exactly is that? Well, first, recognize that every soul has worth. 2, recognize that every life has worth. 3, recognize that it is ultimately our duty to preserve our own liberty and the liberty of others. There are a lot of other principles that go into that, but I think if we can love others enough to respect their freedom, then we have a hope. But it has to come from each one of us individually. And once enough of us individually have that hope, that belief, then that's where our future is bright. But only through that. Because we can't change it in Washington. We can't change it at the United Nations. We can't change it in these large global institutions. It's not going to change there. We can't do it. The forces of evil are arrayed against us. Why? Because the natural man is an enemy to God and has been since the fall of Adam. And will be until he yields to the Spirit, yields to Jesus Christ. And why do I say that? Okay, yeah, I'm getting into Christianity here, and so maybe if you're not a Christian, you won't follow this, but By that I mean Jesus Christ, the embodiment of love God, love thy neighbor. That's the big principle that he introduces. And so that's where we need to be. We need to be improving ourselves, improving our families, each individually. You do that, we have a chance. We have a hope. Maybe not right now. We're going to suffer through some darkness for a little while, I'm sure. But we do it, and maybe, just maybe, we'll have a very glorious golden age in the future that we'll be able to say, yeah, it was worth the sacrifices right now, making my life cleaner, making my life more righteous, so that my kids and my grandkids can have a better day. And with that, I leave you again. I'm the Colorblind Architect. Peace out.